And welcome back to the Sportsnaut interview. And today we're talking SEC football. We've got a big time showdown between number 2 Georgia and number 4 Alabama. And here today to break it all down for us is host of Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are joined by Gordy. Chris, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, man. Perfect time of year. Great time with, we're a few weeks into this thing. NFL's in full swing. College is in full swing. Almost out of hurricane season. So It's a great time of year.
Yeah, and Chris, this is the first real big matchup of the college football team, 2 big-time SEC schools. Let's first start with the matchup of the coaches here. We know Kirby Smart is looking to become the new face of college football since Nick Saban retired and Jim Harbaugh, decided to go back to the NFL. Now, Kalen DeBoer on the other side is, he's getting his first taste of this rivalry. Do you think that DeBoer will be up to the task in this big rivalry game?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a huge test for Kalen DeBoer to prove that he's SEC ready. And to me, I heard so many people talk about this guy all offseason about he's a winner. He's a winner. Well, the reality is so much of his head coaching career came back in the mid 2000s at Sioux Falls. I don't count that. I'm sorry. He did a fantastic job there, but this is a different time, a different place. Look, I thought Brett Bielema was an awesome coach at Wisconsin. He wasn't cut out for the SEC. I mean, this conference will eat people alive. So, look, 2 decent years at Fresno State, 2 really awesome years at Washington. Great. But I still think as a head coach, his track record still is very small, especially at the Division I power football level. So, he's passed with flying colors so far. I think it was a nice road win at Wisconsin. I really wish Tyler Van Dyke had not gotten hurt early in the game and would have played the full game. I think it might have had a chance to be a little bit closer, but they played in the muck for about 3 quarters against USF before they pulled away and really ran away with the game in the 4th quarter. But, this is going to be the first real test against a legit big time opponent to see how Kalen DeBoer coaches. And I'm really intrigued to see, how he does from game plan throughout the week in how they execute Jalen Milroe in the run game to late in this one. What happens if they got to kick a long field goal? What happens if they have to punt versus go for it on 4th down? This is going to be a big, big test for Kalen DeBoer to show not only that he belongs in the SEC, but belongs as the successor to Nick Saban. And yeah, there's going to be no drop off here.
Yeah. Now staying with the coaches, Kirby Smart is 1-5 against Alabama. And, we've just talked a lot about Kalen DeBoer. He's looking, he's in the shadow right now of Nick Saban, and he needs to do some good things before he gets anybody in Tuscaloosa to forget about Nick Saban. So going into this game, do you feel like there's more pressure on any one of these coaches?
Let's back up a little bit. Kirby Smart is 97-16 in his career at Georgia. He went 14-1 2 years ago, 15-0 the next year, 13-1 last year, and he's 3-0 this year. Kirby's won at a rate that nobody else has. I wouldn't have even put Jim Harbaugh in that category. I know they won the title last year, but Kirby has shown time and time again. We were talking about them going for a 3-peat last year.
Yeah.
And if they make a run this year and win it all, we're talking 3 championships in 4 years. That is dynasty talk. So, I still think Kirby is the elite. Coming into the season, we all said, who's the best coach of college football? I think everybody agreed it's Kirby Smart. Yeah. So this is the time for, everybody keeps bringing up his record against Alabama. I peel that away and say that's his record against Nick Saban. This is Alabama post Nick Saban. And again, it's a lot of good players still there, but this is Kirby Smart versus Kalen DeBoer. And that's where I say a lot of in-game management is going to come into play here. How does he coach? Because we know Nick always had his team up ready for that 3rd quarter, 4th quarter to pull it out and put you away and put their foot on your throat. To me, this is more of a, Kirby, how do you handle a tough road environment in Tuscaloosa? And there's a reason why they've been sitting as a still 2.5 point favorite all week. Those buildings in Vegas, they keep their lights on. They know what they're doing. And, they still favor Georgia in this one. And so, I still think it's advantage Georgia. I still think it's advantage Kirby Smart. Did they look human 2 weeks ago against Kentucky? Yes. But Georgia's done this every year. 2 years ago, it was a 4th quarter rally against Mizzou Last year, they were tied with Auburn in the fourth quarter and pulled it out. They play one of those close games every year. It just happens. You find a way to win, keep winning, stay undefeated. And so, this is the first big test for Georgia of the season. I think what's great about Georgia, too, is that week one win over Clemson looks better and better each week. To hold that Clemson offense to 3 points, and each week we go by and see that Clemson offense looks better and better. I think Georgia might be just a hair better tested this season than maybe Alabama.
Right. And they were tested in their last game 2 weeks ago against Kentucky, which I think most people thought they would win that game a little bit more convincingly, but they were tested, and that could go a long ways for them in this one here. Now, I want to talk about playoff implications that this game has. And maybe some people aren't thinking about that, but I did a little bit of digging here. Georgia still has to go to Texas and Ole Miss, and then also has to face Tennessee. So there's some tough games left on that schedule. They're going to have to win at least 2 of those 4 games, and that's without losing any of these other games that they have on their schedule if they want to get into the college football playoff. And Alabama, they have to play at Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma, and they have a home game with Missouri. So both teams with tough games remaining on the schedule. And so to me, I think there's a lot of pressure on the coaches, but there's also major playoff implications in this game. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different time. If this were 20 years ago and it was the BCS era, I mean, the winner of this team would be in the driver's seat. The loser would be all but out of the championship picture already. So, that's how much it stunk to lose in the BCS era. It is a big game, though, in your, how you kind of pose that, because, like if you lose this game, you have little room for error. If you win this game, it still buys you a loss on the way down the road. I mean, you can lose a game and still get to Atlanta. I do wonder how many teams have kind of shifted their focus, though. We know the reality is you get to Atlanta, play for an SEC title, and if you win it, you get to buy. And that's a great reward. You get to sit and wait. I think some teams look at it, though, and go, look, maybe I'd like to not play for the SEC title. I get an extra bye that week, right? Because I don't have to play. Sure. And then you're hosting a home playoff game the next week, and you feel pretty good about that. So, it's all in how you look at it. But, there might be a reward in the loser of this game. You might look at it and say, okay, maybe we lose another game along the way, but at 10-2, we don't have to go play for an SEC title, and we get an extra week to prepare for a home playoff game. It might actually be a better blessing in disguise. But to your point, yeah, I mean, to me, I think Georgia might have the slightly tougher road in, after having to play at Alabama, having to go to Texas. We know Austin is going to be rocking that week. I've already heard one of the big races is going on that weekend, Austin. So, you can't even get a hotel in town that weekend. We'll see what happens with Ole Miss down the road, but having to go to Oxford should be a tough environment. They do get Tennessee at home, but I mean, Tennessee's sitting right there as a top 5 team, and everybody's singing their praises right now. Colin Cowherd just picked them as, his early national champion this year. Wow. And for Bama, the reality is they got to go on the road to 2 places, Tennessee and LSU, 2 places that they lost last time they went. And by the way, last time they went to those places, Nick Saban was their coach. Now it's Kalen DeBoer. We'll see if they, if it's even tougher to win in those environments. And I'm glad you mentioned at Oklahoma too, because people are writing them off right now because the offense hasn't looked great. They've switched to Michael Hawkins this week. I think it's the right move. Jackson Arnold was not moving the ball. They were not doing anything. If Hawkins grows and looks good as the season goes along, that suddenly becomes a really dangerous team late November that Alabama's got to go to Norman. And what if Hawkins and an offense is producing? That could be a really dangerous spot for Alabama down the road. So I'm glad you mentioned them.
What about the matchup with Alabama's explosive offense and Georgia's defense, who does not allow a lot of explosive plays? In fact, again, I just want to have some notes here for you. Alabama's offense is averaging 12 explosive plays per game, and they have, and that's 8th in FBS, and they have the most touchdowns of 20-plus yards. On the flip side of that, Georgia is ranked number 2. They're among the best defenses in college football at eliminating explosive plays. So how do you see that those teams' strengths being a factor in this game?
Yeah, I believe Georgia's actually got the number 1 passing defense at giving up 91 yards through the air per game. So, it's interesting because they're very talented back there. Dalen Everett and those guys, they haven't really been tested yet, and so this is going to be the first real test. And I still don't think Alabama's got an elite receiving corps, but they've been good enough. And obviously, the 17-year-old phenom Ryan Williams has been the guy that's been taking college football by storm so far. But this will be the true test. And I've been saying that as a challenge to Georgia's DBs all week. Bro, you're a bunch of 4- and 5-star recruits that have been in this program for a couple of years. You're about to let a 17-year-old come in and run past you and make big plays. Like, to me, like, this is a kid that reclassified that's supposed to be in high school right now. So I would just issue a challenge. And look, it's a road environment. I get it. If you get beat, it is what it is. It's advantage Alabama going into this one because you're the road team. But I just look at those guys from Everett to Julian Humphrey. Obviously, we know how good Malachi Starks is at safety. Like, Georgia's still just loaded with 4- and 5-star talent all over that defense. I do wonder if Mykel Williams is going to play. They've been kind of saying all week it's iffy. Look, the closer it gets and there's still no clear answer, it feels like he's probably not going to give it a go. But if he does, I've been told, probably going to come in on just third down passing situations. I just think that's big because of Jalen Milroe's running ability, right? I mean, at any moment he could pull it down and he could run it. It's just an added element that Georgia's got to worry about. And that's where, Small London and all those guys, the linebackers, come into play and have to play sideline to sideline. But, again, I think you make some great points. I think Georgia's defense, this is put up or shut up time. Like, we know how elite you guys typically are. You normally dominate opponents. You normally are top 5 in, points allowed, limiting opponents from scoring the football. By the same realm Alabama has as well, but I don't know how good this Alabama defense is. We saw Byron Brown from USF run and tuck it and get some yards on them on the ground. And so I'll be curious to see how they step up and stop the run. In fact, Alabama's rushing defense on the year ranks 68th in the country. I don't know if we've ever been 3-4 weeks into the season and seeing that Alabama defense be that vulnerable to giving up the run. So, I think, the numbers are skewed a little bit too on Bama. I mean, we watched them for 3 quarters. They couldn't run the football on USF. And then fourth quarter, they break off long touchdown run, long touchdown run, long touchdown run, and it skews the stats. But I can't ignore what I saw for 3 quarters of football. You couldn't move the ball. So, again, there's a lot of question marks with both of these teams, having, not played an SEC game yet, or Georgia has, but, a real SEC test to see how good they are. And it's going to be a great barometer for both teams on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up Jalen Milroe. That's the final thing that I want to ask you about is the matchup with the quarterbacks. We Carson Beck, we know he's one of the top quarterback prospects in this year's draft class. He should be one of the top quarterbacks to hear his name called. 2 different types of styles with these quarterbacks. You mentioned Monroe's ability to run the ball. He's more mobile. Carson Beck, more of a pocket passer. And of course, we know they both met in the SEC championship game last year. What are you expecting from the quarterbacks in this game?
Yeah, I thought, Beck did not play a clean game in that SEC championship game, obviously. And Georgia had some offensive line issues. And, obviously they got some injuries right now that they're going to have to figure out. I've at least been told it sounds like it's going to be Ernest Green and Dylan Fairchild on that left side. And we'll see how they hold up with Tate Ratledge out, who shifts over and plays that right guard spot. But if they can protect and give him time, I thought they made a super big mistake in trying to make, with Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey play through the injuries. They were not 100%. It was evident in that game. Look, this is why you recruit, and this is why you hit up the transfer portal. They had some really good, talented receivers behind them. They just didn't play it. And so they forced the guys at, 50, 60% to play through the injury, and just Georgia's offense was clunky and they weren't able to execute. I think this is a big, big game to prove, all right, who are those playmakers this year? We've seen some glimpses from Dylan Bell. We've seen Dominic Lovett last time out look really good. Who's going to step up? I heard all offseason about how great Colby Young is, this transfer from Miami, and he's been okay, but he's a big red zone threat. If Georgia gets down there into the red zone, throw him the football. Make him out physical those Bama DBs who, by the way, this might be the weakest Alabama secondary that they've had in a decade or a decade plus. Big test for them to have to wrangle in these big weapons that Georgia's got. I think Oscar Delp, Lucky Lawson, those guys, Lawson Lucky rather, at tight end, I think are really good guys that can grow into something at that tight end spot in life after Brock Bowers. But yeah, to me, it's all about giving Carson Beck time. And then can they be balanced? Can they run the football? Obviously, Trevor Etienne was suspended the first couple games of the season, got in there. We got to see a little bit of what he could do coming over from Florida, but they're going to have to run the football effectively. They're going to have to pass protect for Carson Beck. But, this is the money game. You mentioned it. Everybody talked about Carson Beck being the, potential Heisman winner and first round pick next year and all that. I think the Heisman race could very much swing this week, with depending on how Jalen Miller performs and how Carson Beck performs. And the winner is going to be right up there near the top of the contenders the next couple of weeks.
Yep, absolutely. It should be a great game. I'm looking forward to it. And if you're a fan of SEC football, you should be listening to Chris on the Locked On SEC podcast. Chris, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for all of your insight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, man. Anytime.